Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to the video. This one is dedicated to the patrons that wanted me to do a Olympia deck profile as well as a Kasai deck profile. I'm still working on the Kasai list, but my Olympia deck is about as close to done as it can be. There's of course two ways to play Olympia. You can play it with swords or you can play it with axes, or in this case a Decimator Great Axe. The version that I went for is actually pretty much focused around having a full-on fatigue strategy, so you block for 9+ from hand and then you just swing with the Decimator Great Axe. However, there are some really cool combos in here that can make this kind of a cool and powerful deck. Namely that you can use things like Money Where Your Mouth Is, which turns your axe into a wager. As well as, what's the other card? The card called the Hold'em right here. You can wager a figure token with your opponent, because if you play multiple of these, let's say you play a Hold'em, a Money Where Your Mouth Is, and let's say a second copy of Money Where Your Mouth Is, then you're already wagering 3 times, right? Just with those 3 cards and pitching a blue. But then if you combine that with a cash-in, destroying a gold token, and potentially drawing into 2 more blues, of one being the up the ante, then you're in a very favorable position. If you have 2 blues, for example, you can pay the 3, get all the wagers right here as well on top of that, and then that means that you've wagered 6 times with your X, which means that this is gonna give a +6 power. The 3 wagers from the Money Where Your Mouth Is and the Hold'ems is like an additional 9 power, so then you have a 15 power plus attack already, plus the 4 from the Decimator Great Axe. So what I do think that this deck is able to do, and that I've had some success with, is to kind of play into a bit of a pitch stacking shenanigans, where you pitch certain cards to the bottom so that you can have some really powerful turns at the end of the game by utilizing things like Iron Song Determination to really get that last bit of damage in before your opponent is able to finish you. For the most part, against decks like Dorantia or all the fair decks like Ninja, this deck can hold its ground relatively well, because you have of course the whole fridge available to you. You have lots of 2-block equipment. You have the Ironhide legs in there because we don't really need the Valiant Dynamos, and we also don't really need the other thing called Refraction Bolter, so we can actually use the Ironhide legs in combination with things like the Steelblade Shunt to get a 6-block and not wasting any resources that way, which is kind of nice and kind of good in general. We can play Emboldened Blades, Warmonger's Diplomacy, Blue Unmovables, just to have a bunch of very good generic blue slots in there as well. And then of course Rouse the Angel with the Gore Belching combo. So for the most part with the Gore Belching, what I tend to do is I just block with everything from hand except the Gore Belching, or I try to get this one into my arsenal. And then in a late game scenario where you're kind of swinging back and forth to get the tempo back, it's a really good card to play because it's just a 7 attack because there's no other attacks in the deck. Double Down is a really powerful card because you can destroy one of your gold tokens to give your next attack +3 as long as you wager, but usually you're going to be wagering anyways. And then it says if a hero would create 1 or more tokens from a wager this turn, instead create that many +1 of each of those. What is cool about this is that when you wager with the opponent with something like an up the ante, for example, this wagers 3 tokens at once, then you basically generate yourself 6 tokens, which creates this huge amount of tempo in the follow-up turn, because thanks to the up the ante, double figure token available to you. The agilities don't really do anything in this deck, but it's just nice to have them in order to have another wager activation for the plus power down here. And the extra gold tokens are going to be quite useful in order to pay for your cash-ins or future versions of Double Down, so that's kind of nice as well. And then we have Commanding Performance. I think this is a great card. Like, it doesn't really do much against decks that don't run attack action cards, but even if not, I tend to just side this one out for something like a Shatter or something like that if I'm up against those kind of decks. But with a card like this, it's almost like a Command and Conquer, where you attack with your axe, you give it +3 with this, and then your opponent is in a very tough position, because if they don't block, they take a huge chunk of damage, and if they do block, then they pretty much lose the arsenal. So if they have a defense reaction sitting in there, then they cannot really do much with it. So I really like this particular card as well. In terms of competitive viability of the deck, we do have some very favorable card economy cards like the Overpowers and the Fell Swings, where you can basically push 6 value with 1 card without losing any cards in your deck. I run a 60 card baseline deck, but what I usually do is I spice things up by adding some stuff from the sideboard into here. Usually it's gonna be the Shatters against most heroes that have a good equipment piece that needs to be destroyed. Sometimes I bring something like the Cleave if I'm up against something like a Dromai, so I can very easily clean out the dragons by, for example, attacking one of the dragons or even attacking Dromai herself and then destroying one of the dragons along with it. And we have a couple of 6 blocks and 7 blocks to pop Phantasm, because Prism is starting to be quite popular lately, and I think it's just good in general to have these 2 available to us. And the Vigorous Wind-Up is quite good if you're going second as well. If you have this one in your hand and your opponent isn't really doing much, and at instant speed you can simply discard this thing, create yourself that figure token, and then you have a 1 resource discount in the follow-up turn, so I quite like that as well. And then we have some immovables here, mainly for the Guardian matchup, so we have some big blockers in here available to stop the crush effects. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to share today in regards to Olympia. So personally, I made the decision that I built this deck in a way that it doesn't really utilize much of Kasai's cards. Like, as you can see, I don't have the Spoils of War and such in here. I don't have things like Glint the Quicksilvers in here. You could add them in if you wanted to, but I think this deck doesn't really need them. And doing so, I can very easily build the Kasai deck, have the whole kit of the Kasai deck ready to play whenever I want without having to swap cards back and forth between those two decks. But I don't think having those cards in is gonna do all that much in general anyway. I think a full-on control shell is just best for Olympia, because the deck really has issue pushing out value or a lot of value consistently, and just going with the full-on defense plan is probably just in general, let's just put it like that. But regardless, I'm going to be continuing to optimize this deck. Once I have some updates, I'm probably not gonna do a full-on video again, so I will probably just upload the new link over on my Patreon. If you're watching this and you're not a patron yet, you can find me over on patreon.com/GuganiGaming. I'm still moving to the new apartment at the moment, so my upload schedule is a little bit all over the place. I'm trying to get at least 2 videos live on my channel every month at the moment, but I will try to do a bit more updates on Patreon whenever I have a little bit of time here and there. Today I had a bit of extra time because one of the people that I usually coach on Thursdays couldn't make it today. Unfortunately, they had a fever. I'm sorry for them, but it did give me a little bit of time to go ahead and record this video and put this one live on here, so yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I was sick for 2 weeks myself as well. It's sometimes life happens, I suppose, but I guess there's always a bit of opportunity when these kind of things happen, right? So yeah, that's all for me for today for real now then. I hope this video was informative to you, and if this has inspired you to build your own Olympia build, you can definitely just copy mine and continue experimenting from there by adding things in and taking stuff out. This is a very decent build already. There's a lot of things that can be optimized in here, of course, but I will just see in time how and what I'm going to be replacing after I do more playtesting. I tend to keep a little notebook with me when I do playtests against competitive players, so I can keep track of things I would like to change. Anyways, thank you everyone, see you all soon, and have a great day.